guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here. We're going to break down the dismissal of Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M along with some potential candidates. Timestamps will be below if you'd like to skip to that portion of the video. But going over this tenure, Nick, in College Station, remember when Jimbo left FSU after a 5-6 season? It was the biggest, headline in recent memory in college football after a lot of tenured success down there in Tallahassee. Comes to A&M on a massive deal. And look at us now. We're in 2023. They did come off a 40-point victory over Mississippi State just yesterday. In the week prior, they lost to Ole Miss, who just got thumped by Georgia. And, it might be a measuring stick for the administration. I guess maybe the decision was already made. You look at this 2023 season. No one really expected A&M to be better than an 8-4 football team. They lose to Bama by 6, 7 at Tennessee, at Ole Miss by only 3. I mean, this is a team that wasn't exactly getting beaten badly this year, other than the game in Miami. But again, the expectations, I don't think this season were all that high, coming off a 5-7 season, 45-25 overall record for Jimbo. And you wonder, Connor Wigman, if he doesn't get hurt, where is this football team right now? Obviously the tide seemed to be turning a little bit last season when they landed the number one recruiting class, I think, all time with, NIL and whatnot and all that money. And, of course, there's some off-season drama with him and Nick Saban, with, Coach Saban talking about how they paid for their entire roster, you know what I mean? And so recruiting has been great for the Aggies ever since he really arrived at Texas A&M, and just the results have not been there one bit. Bringing on Steve Adazio's offensive line coach was just a drastic, bad decision, as this offensive line has regressed. I remember, last year I said coming into 23, they should have the nation's best O-line. They ended up being one of the worst last year, and it certainly is not at to a good point this season, as running the ball has been a problem for them. Bobby Petrino came over, and I think he's done a good job with this offense. They're putting up 34 points per game. Of course, they did struggle against Tennessee on the road, though, and against Bama, they struggled to get things clicking. Again, though, I think Wigman going down kind of doesn't tell the full story where this offense was heading, Nick. But overall, the entire body of work, this roster is way too good to be, not having a single double-digit winning season in College Station. And now $75 million later, the Aggies are looking for their next lead man. What do you make of this assessment so far? Texas A&M, it seems like they're just going to throw more money at the next problem. But Jimbo here drastically underperformed with a lot of talent here, and it starts really with that offensive line. Last year was a poor run defense. Elite talent in the trenches. They got nothing out of them.
We knew Jimbo Fisher was on the hot seat, but I didn't expect to wake up this morning and see him fired after a thumping of Mississippi State last night. Apparently, the decision was already made Thursday by the Texas A&M Board of Regents to make this move. The money with it staggering, the highest buyout in college football history by $50 million, the second highest was, I believe, Gus Malzahn at Auburn, and it was only in the 20s, and this is $75 million. I mean, just an absolute ridiculous number. I think people forget how good of a coach Jimbo was at Florida State, considering how this has gone so poorly at A&M. Won the BCS National Championship in 2013 with Jameis Winston, went to the first ever playoff with Winston at the helm, still lost in the Rose Bowl to a very good Oregon team that year, was 10-3 in 2015, 10-3 in 2016. A bad loss to Georgia Tech at a buzzer beater in one of those years, knocked them out of the hunt for the playoff. But still a fantastic body of work at Florida State. So this really looked like a home run hire for Texas A&M that was struggling under Kevin Summerlin to really get the job done in the conference. And he ends up leaving A&M, or Jimbo leaves A&M with a worse record than Summerlin had. Summerlin was 51-26 during his time. Jimbo was 45-25. No 10-win seasons. Summerlin had an 11-win season in 2012, the first season in the SEC. So this is just an embarrassing overall experience from A&M. They have so much talent. Number one recruiting class to go 5-7 and now 6-4. They're going to be bowl eligible. That's about it. 8-4, 8-5, 9-4. It's just not good enough when you're a school like A&M that has so much money, so much proud football history, and plays in one of the best stadiums in college football. Their best season under him was the COVID year where they were 9-1, but even that year they got blown out by Alabama. I know it's different earlier in the season, but they lost that Alabama team by multiple scores and ended up winning the Orange Bowl. They didn't make the playoff that year. In my opinion, they shouldn't have made the playoff. Notre Dame was the right pick for that situation. Jimbo gets his walking papers, $75 million to leave and just sit on the couch. Not a bad deal if you ask me. A&M's scrambling to figure this out because they've joined the SEC and they've yet to capitalize on the opportunity. When they joined the SEC, they figured they would be a dominant force in recruiting with the great facilities, like I said, world-class facilities, great boosters, great money down there in Aggie land, and they've not been able to produce in the conference. And now Texas joins the conference next year. Oklahoma joins the conference. And it's going to get a lot tougher to recruit in Texas, the state of Texas, when you have Texas knocking on the door, joining the same conference as you, a rivalry game returning. This is a move that was coming at some point. Didn't expect it now. A&M's in a tough spot here. They're going to have to throw a ton of money at somebody to get the job done. There's a lot of options. We're going to go through a ton of them, but man, this is a tough spot to be coaching right now. I would not be wanting to take this job if I was a high-profile college football coach.
Yeah, and in 2020, their average winning margin really wasn't all that great. I think it was one of the lower ones in CFB at the time. They did win the Orange Bowl, and it seemed like they were going to be progressing at a pretty high rate after that. They beat, of course, they beat Alabama in 21 and 22. They only lost by 4 points this past year. They lost by 6, and that's really the measuring stick when you want to talk about us. How can you compete with Georgia and Alabama? And I mean, the last 3 years they've did that at a pretty high level, right? I mean, losing by a couple of points, there's no shame in that against Alabama, especially considering how the previous years had went against that program. But again, just high-level recruiting that did not pay off at all. I mean, these guys have drastically underperformed. Remember, he had like a 30-game winning streak at Florida State or something like that, putting in crazy amounts of players in the NFL. They should have been doing that there in College Station. That's just not been the case. And just it starts with what they were able or unable to accomplish, that is in the trenches, because I really thought, with the size and talent they had, they would be the best in CFB in that area, and they just are not one bit. So leading to some of these candidates, Nick, I don't think there's much else to add, really. It's just been a disaster of a 10-year. Aggie fans are very upset. Like you said, that's a wonderful place down there. That stadium is phenomenal, and now they're going to be in a deep hole here. Any last thoughts you want to add to this, what was once going to be a high promising hire for a program that's now in disarray?
It's truly spectacular how badly this fell apart for A&M. Like you said, when they made the move poaching him from Florida State, it seemed like they had shaken the grounds of college football. It seemed like he had run out of steam at Florida State. They had been 10-3 in 2016, but they were 5-6 in 2017. It seemed like they were kind of falling apart, and it seemed like that taking Jimbo to A&M was just going to be that launching pad. Another thing that I think is interesting is another Saban disciple that just doesn't quite get the job done at the big level. Outside of Kirby Smart, the Saban disciples have not really been able to get the job done at their different programs. Another bad footnote for Nick Saban's coaching tree, in my opinion.
Now looking at these candidates, and I think the favorite for everyone's going to be Lane Kiffin, obviously at Ole Miss. He's really he was a hot name last year's cycle for other SEC West gigs. I think Auburn was the lead for them. They really seemed like they had him in the bag at one point. I think they're certainly going to throw a lot of money at him, and obviously they're coming off a thumping against Georgia. But right after that game, he said that we just got to recruit better. It's on us, not the players. And that's quite telling, Nick, because you're going to be able to recruit down in College Station. And I think this is something he's certainly going to entertain. A guy that's just revaulted his college football coaching career. Seems like he was down in the dumps. Joins Nick Saban's staff, has success at FAU, and now Ole Miss is a contender, a team that's has one of the high flying offenses in college football. 10 wins in 21, went 8-5 a season ago. An 8-2 mark so far this year. But Ole Miss, everyone can kind of tell this is a team that certainly has progressed year after year. Their defense when he first got there was abysmal. Obviously, they didn't look great last night against Georgia, but that's certainly an improved unit, Nick, for the most part, compared to where they used to be. And, he has not been able to get over the hump and beat Alabama. I think A&M and Fisher's teams over the last couple of years have played them much better. That's been a problem. But they have a couple of marquee wins on there. They beat a ranked Kentucky team in Oxford last year. And, the end of last season wasn't all that great. Certainly had some issues with, Jackson Dart transferring over in his first season. But that Matt Corral year in 2021 was certainly a special one. I didn't think that team would do very good. I think I picked them to win like 6 or 7 games, played a lot of ranked opponents. They topped Arkansas in a shootout. They beat the Aggies. And they also, had some other notable victories that year. I think the one over Liberty was pretty notable as well. Not the craziest, but still. Lane Kiffin, regardless, has built this program into a winner. They're still trying to get to that next level, and I think, in 4 years, they're certainly showcasing that progress that you want to see. And his offenses with his brilliant mind are only going to continue to grow and get better, especially with what he's able to do with Quinshawn Judkins, who was a true freshman last year, and he was one of the best players in college football. His development at the quarterback position is very evident, something A&M certainly struggled with, something Jimbo was supposed to be very good with at the Aggies and just wasn't able to do so. Lane Kiffin is going to be the lead hire here, Nick. I think he's certainly going to be able to recruit at a high level, and even if especially if you bring Pete Golding with him, right? So I think this is certainly going to be the foundation they want. I think Kiffin, with more years at Ole Miss, would certainly start to perform better, but he seems like he's going to be a Texas A&M Aggie here soon.
I think this would make sense for A&M, but also I have some concerns about this. It seems like Lane Kiffin has capped out his potential at Ole Miss just due to the finances down there in Oxford. He isn't going to be able to get the talent that he can get at a school like A&M. When you go to A&M, you can get basically anyone you want. They're very powerful in the recruiting, the money, especially NIL era. They're going to be able to buy whatever players they want at this point. So Kiffin will have an untapped potential, basically, a blank check to build his roster, especially he brings Pete Golding, like you said, who is a fantastic recruiter. And that defense is improving. I know they got run over by Georgia But outside of the Georgia game, the defense has looked good in a lot of the samples we've seen so far this season for Kiffin. Kiffin obviously is a big name that's continued to circulated with Auburn last year. They did not pull the trigger on that. I think this could make a lot of sense for A&M, right? Kiffin is such a powerful figure in college football, a great personality who is putting together winning records at Ole Miss. 8 wins at least in the past 3 seasons, including a trip to the New Year's Six in 2021 where they lost to Baylor in that game. Kiffin's a fantastic coach who will coach an incredible offense. A&M's offense has seen some struggles. The defense has not really been the issue, in my opinion. The defense is playing fantastic. Also interesting to note that his former DC is currently calling the plays for the defensive side of the ball at A&M, so I think that's an interesting thing to look at there. Former Maryland head coach as well calling the plays for the A&M defense. So that's an interesting thing to note. I think Kiffin would be a fantastic hire for A&M. They have the blank check. They can certainly do it. Does Kiffin want this job? I'm not entirely sure if he does. I don't know. It seems like Kiffin wants to take the Alabama job, as much as I don't know if Alabama is truly interested in taking Kiffin after Nick Saban retires. He's a fantastic offensive coach. 31-14 record at a school like Ole Miss is very impressive, and having the talent he would have at A&M, it could be a home run hire.
A guy I think would be a great hire that's certainly not going to be the flashiest of names would be Mike Elko. He was a former A&M defensive coordinator from 2018 to 2021. That last year with the Aggies, the defense was only giving up, 16 points per game. That's one of the nation's top marks. Goes to Duke. I really wasn't sure about the hire for the Blue Devils. He instantly gets to work. They go 9-4 in his first season. Sit at 6-4 right now, but everyone knows that's not the full story. They should have beat Notre Dame if it wasn't for a 4th and 17 run by Sam Hartman to pick up the first and eventually the game-winning touchdown. They were outplaying Florida State before Wiley Leonard re-aggravated his injury. Obviously, he was still banged up going into the Louisville game. And with a backup quarterback here on the road at North Carolina just last night, they took them to double overtime. They were able to, almost outlast them in a shootout with a backup quarterback who looked awful in his first start the week prior. This is a team that plays phenomenal defense as well. And again, the full story is that Leonard just went down. The offense has really stalled out, and that's caused this team to really struggle. But Nick, we've been watching Duke all year, a lot of last year as well. And Elko is certainly changing this program for the good. Their defensive improvements have been absolutely ridiculous. In 2021, they gave up 40 points per game. He gets in first year, lowers that number down to 22, down to under 19 this current season. And this is where just 3-star guys that really fit his scheme. He's able to add some transfers. Of course, his 4.25 has just been terrific. And it was really splendid here for the Aggies. They continue to get better year after year. At Texas A&M, they have great defensive linemen in terms of talent. They're going to be able to add a lot of guys. And these other positions, you look at guys in linebacker like Edgar and Cooper having a phenomenal year. In the secondary, they should be able to recruit there just as fine as well. You bring that scheme, Nick, back to Texas A&M along with the physicality you'll have in your front six, and I think this defense would certainly be clicking. And of course, the defense wasn't exactly the problem, but Kevin Johns has been a very good coordinator for the Duke offense, like I just talked about. Last night with a backup quarterback that did not look very good, and in one more week of time, he was able to put 45 on the board. So I think this is a nice, quiet offensive staff, and I think you'd certainly attract better offensive staff members as well. I think this could be the home run hire for Texas A&M. He's obviously changed the culture at Duke, not considered just a basketball school right now.
I absolutely love this hire. I think this is a fantastic hire here for A&M. Like you said, a previous coordinator at Texas A&M, so he has some experience down there in Aggieland, a familiar face, and he had a great tenure as defensive coordinator there. I think this is a very underrated portion of his game. Look at the total defense, right? They were 9th in total defense during the COVID year, including 2nd in rush defense. They were 34th in total defense his first year in 2018, as well as 2nd in rushing defense. They had a top 35 defense all 4 years he was there. He had a top 50 defense at Wake Forest the 2 years he was there. He also had a top 50 defense at Notre Dame during the 1 year, a top 10 defense 2 years in a row at Bowling Green. So Mike Elko can certainly coach a defense. This team, he won ACC Coach of the Year last year at Duke, 9-4 in his first year, turning around that program overnight. Like you said, the 6-4 record, we already talked about that. That's not very representative of actually how talented this Duke team is. I think Elko would be a home run hire here. This guy is getting great experience at Duke. He's making stuff happen with less talent, and when you have a blank check at A&M, he will be able to recruit just about whoever he wants and build his team how he wants. You can get a great offensive mind in there. You can just really pick whoever you want to be the offensive coordinator at this point, and that would be no problem at all for him. I think this Elko hire would be a home run hire. He's a fantastic defensive coach, and A&M are very good on defense, and they really recruit some seriously talented players on defense. Just plug in a nice, talented, young gun offensive coordinator. This team could be flying under Elko. I think this would be a fantastic hire.
Now looking at another guy that I think is certainly going to be in the running for this, that you're probably going to have to throw a lot of money at, 37-year-old Dan Lanning. Obviously he inherited a pretty good roster at Oregon. Mario Cristobal did a good job building that up. And, of course, when he left, they got hammered by Utah twice, once in the Pac-12 title game. He pretty much checked out, I think, that final month of the year. And so, obviously the results in Cristobal's final year weren't the greatest, but everyone knows this was a really good football team that in Justin Herbert's final year probably should have been a playoff team if it wasn't for some Bo Nix heroics. And, Lanning inherited that great roster, put the finishing touches on it that has them in national championship contention, adding Bo Nix and a slew of transfers on both sides, 10-3 a season ago, 9-1 currently. And they're certainly going to continue to march forward in terms of trying to get to the playoff this season. Nick, this seems very much a goal that Oregon's going to accomplish this season. Obviously, he has a big $20 million buyout himself. And I thought that, maybe USC, when they landed Lincoln Riley, would be able to go out there and try to battle these guys and kind of change the recruiting tide that Cristobal had taken from the Trojans. That hasn't exactly been the case. Lanning's been doing a phenomenal job in the recruiting trail, obviously with his stints at Alabama and Georgia. Very good defensive coordinator. He understands that side of the ball very well. He's done a very good job with his staff, guys like Tosh Opoy at DC and Will Stein at offensive coordinator, Kenny Dillingham the year prior to that. So I think this guy, he has plenty of knowledge. He might be young, Nick, but he has a lot of characteristics. And I think when it comes to toughness and being a guy that certainly speaks to his players, I think this would be a pretty solid hire for Texas A&M. Do you think this would be a bad one, though? Because, again, the Oregon roster is already pretty well constructed. And the A&M one is also pretty well constructed, but they do need to tweak some things on the offensive side of the ball. And what a defensive-minded coach has been able to do on offense for the Ducks, it's mind-blowing. And that could lead to you having one of the top teams in the country year after year.
This is a very interesting name I've seen thrown out. This guy has a great resume despite being 37 years old. Coached under Mike Norvell at Memphis, coached at Georgia under Kirby Smart, was a graduate assistant at Alabama, won a national championship under Nick Saban, coached as defensive coordinator at Georgia, won a national championship with the Bulldogs, and now is with the Ducks, 19-4 record overall. Fantastic start to his young coaching career. This would be a great hire, but I also think there's something interesting about this. Is the dynamic with Alabama. I've seen his name come up a lot recently in Tuscaloosa. His name been talked about quite frequently. Of course, it's all just sort of rumors at this point, but a lot of people in Tuscaloosa, a lot of the power players at the University of Alabama are very interested in having Dan Lanning be the next head coach at Alabama after Nick Saban. Nick Saban is getting closer to retirement than I think a lot of people realize. I think if he gets that 7th national title in Tuscaloosa, he's gonna retire and hang up the coaching boots, and I think Lanning will be a fantastic position to succeed him in Tuscaloosa. Lanning, obviously A&M, they have a blank check, right? So they can basically pay the $20 million buyout with no issue at Oregon. And he is putting together a fantastic team with defenses improving. I think that's the big thing with Oregon. Like you said, Oregon always had a very dynamite offense. They were able to put a ton of points on the board, but the defense is what was holding them back. Lanning has steadied the ship on defense. Their defense is fantastic up there in Eugene, and they're a very good unit. So if you can have that dynamic of having an explosive offense in College Station plus the already really solid defense that he would inherit, that could be a recipe for very quick success out there in College Station. This Lanning hire could be a very positive one. I just personally think of the ones that we're going to talk about today, I think this is the least likely due to the fact that Lanning might know what's going on with the rumors in Tuscaloosa. And personally, as an Alabama fan, I want him to be the next head coach at Alabama after what I've seen. I think he'd be a fantastic hire there. Lanning is a great coach, great young coach at 37 and a lot of football ahead of him. This Oregon team's very good, and Dan Lanning's a very solid coach.
I wouldn't quite call the defense fantastic just yet, but it's certainly getting to that point. Obviously, we figured it would take some time. I trust this defense more than anyone else in the Pac-12. There's a lot of high-flying offenses out there. I think Oregon's is the better one to get it done. First career game, he got hammered by 46 at Georgia, and the other 3 career losses come by 4 points or less each. So I think Lanning's a guy that I don't know if right now would be the best timing to go take another job. I think he would just want to continue to build here, especially with them going into the Big Ten. But we'll see what happens. I think that's certainly worth reaching out to him, and he'll probably get a phone call. We'll see what happens. I think Dan Lanning, like you said, a very interesting candidate. Those are 3 guys I think that are going to be pretty solid. Obviously, most lists are going to be the same, Nick. We're going to put our own twist on these guys, though. Who are some guys you're thinking that might be worth the A&M administration reaching out to and throwing a boatload of money at them and could actually solve the problem?
So for me, the first name I want to talk about is Lance Leopold here, currently at Kansas. This guy is a great experienced coach, has great experience at different levels. He coached at Division III for several years, won 3 NCAA Division III national championships at Wisconsin and Whitewater, turned them into a national powerhouse at the Division III level, has experience as an assistant coach at Nebraska in the past, was building a program in Buffalo in upstate New York. They won 2 MAC titles MAC East Division titles 2018 and 2020 before he took the Kansas job. Yes, he has a below 500 record right now, 15-20, but I think he has turned Kansas, which has really no history with football and struggled in the past couple of years. They've been very bad for a while. He turned that team around 2-10 his first year, 6-7 last year, 7-3 this year. They made a bowl game last year for the first time in forever. He's building a whole lot with nothing. That Buffalo team was also solid, 6-1 in the COVID year, 8-5 the year before that, 10-4 in 2018. This is a guy that's got good football experience, a hard-working coach who grinds his players out, grinds his team out. I think this would be a fantastic hire for A&M because he will have the opportunity to work with world-class talent that he's never really worked with at Buffalo, Kansas, and definitely at the Division III level. He can produce with limited talent when you give him that incredible talent and a blank check to recruit. I think Leopold will be a fantastic job. He's doing good at a Big 12 school in Kansas. I think this could make a whole lot of sense for A&M.
Yeah, I certainly don't think recruiting in the state of Texas for the school is going to be the most challenging thing. That's something he'll certainly have to prove that he can do. Like you said, he makes a lot happen with a whole lot of nothing. 109-6 was his record at Wisconsin Whitewater. Half of those losses came in 2012 alone. I mean, that's pretty ridiculous. That's a lot of undefeated seasons there. What he was able to do at Buffalo was also very magnificent. And right now at Kansas, this is a team that has never been able to compete at all, and they've really changed the things. This is a team that does not go away. I mean, they just upset Oklahoma. They play very tough, 2-10 his first season. They might win 10 games this season alone if it's not for some injuries at the quarterback position. He's steadily improving this program in Kansas, and I'm not sure if he would want to leave though, Nick. It's going to be a new look Big 12. It's going to be a little bit easier to compete now with no Oklahoma and Texas. Very quiet scene. There's absolutely zero pressure coaching there in Lawrence. Like you said, he was in Wisconsin before. Coached in Nebraska for a little bit in Buffalo. These are very quiet, low-profile markets. I think it'd be a big culture shock if Leopold were to get the call to A&M.
It certainly would be a big culture shock, but I think Leopold is a fantastic coach that could be up for the task. The next coach I have on my list is Kalen DeBoer at Washington, another coach who has just got to his program, but a turnaround instantly overnight, a guy that had experience coaching at different levels. He won 3 national championships at the NAIA level, which I think is interesting to note, at Sioux Falls in South Dakota in the Great Plains Athletic Conference. Very interesting to look at. Then his first big job was he previously was offensive coordinator at Fresno State, then did a year at Indiana. Got hired by Fresno State as the head coach, went 3-3 in the COVID year, then 9-3 in 21 before jumping to the Huskies, where he was 11-2 last year, 10-0 currently, and looking to be on track for a playoff appearance for the Huskies. This one you could hesitate because you might not want to jump away from Washington. Obviously, he's building something fantastic up there, but money talks in this day and age. He was the AP Pac-12 Coach of the Year last year, Pac-12 Coach of the Year in general last year. I think he's put together an incredible offense. The defense is a concern at Washington, but when you already have a solid defense in place at A&M, and if you could potentially retain some of those talented coordinators like DJ Durkin or get your own talented defensive coordinator, again, with a blank checkbook, they could do something with Kellen DeBoer at A&M. I think he's a fantastic coach at Washington. Those offenses are ridiculously talented, putting up a ton of points. He's 21-2 so far in 2 years, so obviously a winning resume and a small sample size. This would be a very interesting hire. Jumping from the Pac-12 to the SEC could be concerning. I think that's the one thing that would worry me about this is he has no SEC experience. But if you want to talk about a young, talented head coach who is certainly getting experience at a very prominent historical program in Washington and potentially competing for a national championship this year, this could be an interesting move for A&M.
Another guy in DeBoer comes from, quiet marketplace, played and coached at Sioux Falls, born in South Dakota. Was at Fresno State. He was good at Indiana in 2019. Did some good work on the offensive side of the ball. Peyton Ramsey, Michael Penix that year. Of course, Penix, a couple of ACL tears, comes to Washington. He's the Heisman frontrunner right now. This is an authentic coach. This is a guy who loves his players. He's an emotional guy for sure. And that's certainly what you need sometimes. I think certainly it may have been missing in terms of an element. Maybe it's not just the talent, it's, the relationship with some of these players. Jimbo isn't always the most personable guy at times, it seems, and DeBoer, that's certainly something that certainly fits his coaching style. Was very good at Fresno State in 2021. That was a very good ball club as well that, went out there and competed with ranked opponents. So I think, DeBoer, this is a guy that is a great offensive coach. A&M, they really struggle on this side of the ball. Connor Wigman, a current 5-star. This is like another a name that's not exactly flashy, but someone who's had success everywhere. And, they could be really tough coming into the SEC, though. But offense is the name of the game so far. And I don't think the defensive talent's going to go anywhere anytime soon for A&M. And again, it's going to be very easy to attract top defensive minds. I think A&M could certainly do something big, and DeBoer would certainly help in that. Who are you thinking was also going to be on your list here, Nick? Got some great candidates we've already talked about. Who are you thinking is next up?
So this is one that I think people are not going to like me to say, but I think this makes a lot of sense, and you got to hear me out when I explain this. James Franklin at Penn State. People are not going to like me saying this, considering the result they had against Michigan and how they've struggled to get the job done, win the biggest games. But I don't really care what you say. He is a fantastic coach, and he has experience in the past. Coached at Vanderbilt, did a whole lot of something with absolute nothing in an SEC program at Vanderbilt. So he has SEC ties. He coached in the conference. I think that's very important when you're hiring a coach at a big name SEC program. You want to have experience coaching in the conference. It always helps. In 3 years at Vanderbilt, he went 9-4 in back-to-back years, including 2 bowl wins, 24-15 overall. At a school like Vanderbilt is just incredible in my opinion. You really cannot do much better than that if you're a school like Vandy. And at Penn State, yes, the results have not been there against Michigan and Ohio State, but this team has been good at times. 11-3 in 2016, including a trip to the Rose Bowl and a conference title. 11-2 2017, 11-2 2019, 11-2 last year, shaping up to be 11-2 again this year. Won the Rose Bowl last year, won the Cotton Bowl in 2019 against a very good Memphis Group of 5 team. James Franklin can obviously coach, and at A&M, yes, the talent at Penn State is good, but the talent at A&M could be 5 times, 10 times more potentially with the way they're able to recruit. He could be able to build an offense that is super talented. We've seen Penn State's defenses in the past be very solid if you have the players in place and starting to have the recruiting building in place down there in A&M. The defenses can be phenomenal. People might hate this one, and if you want to have a comment about this, you can certainly leave a comment attacking this if you don't like it, but I think this is a very interesting potential hire here. Franklin has a great resume in his coaching career, 110-53 record overall, 86-38 at Penn State. Penn State also probably wouldn't mind this. They're thinking about moving on. I don't know if that's the right idea, but the Penn State fans are getting a little restless in Happy Valley. This could be a win-win for both parties involved. I think it's something you have to look at if you're A&M, considering his history coaching in the SEC.
Well, I think right now the highest buyout in college football will probably be James Franklin. I'm just pure speculation, but based on Mel Tucker being axed, Fisher now gone, if I had to guess, he's probably the highest one. Nick, you think they're willing to put down, a substantial down payment on a guy that's certainly underachieved, I think, at times at Penn State with his inability to, take over the top of the conference since winning it back in 2016, not being able to beat Michigan and Ohio State, and his peak seems to be kind of reached there. 12-team playoff certainly going to be something that's going to help him out at Penn State. But again, that's a lot of money you're talking about if you want to bring James Franklin over, and a lot of people wouldn't probably be convinced it's much of an upgrade.
I actually think that, A&M is one school in the country that has the money to do this. They may not like to, but the boosters have the money. We've seen it in the past. You make a good point about the 12-team playoff. I believe I saw a Twitter post where someone said that if a 12-team playoff had existed in the playoff era, Penn State would have made it 6 times, that they have just fallen short 6 times, but they would have been in that 12 bracket. They benefit greatly from potential 12-team playoff, which is why Franklin may stay in Happy Valley. I think it just makes sense to me. I think, yes, he's underachieved and beating the big schools, and yes, the buyout will be expensive, but A&M have a ton of money, and I think he'd be able to do a lot with the talent down there in College Station. I think this could be a sleeper pick potentially. It most likely won't happen, but it's something to keep your eye on, and I think it could work if it is done and executed properly down there at A&M.
Now looking at a couple of wild card candidates, obviously a lot of people are going to talk about Dan Campbell. He's done great things with the Lions in just a short time. He's a guy anyone would want to run through a wall for. He's also a guy that plays with or coaches with plenty of emotion and energy, and I think a lot of people appreciate that. I don't think Dan Campbell, being a former alum of the university, is going to be in play here. It's obviously a completely different game. Obviously, the pay is going to be pretty nice, but you're also going to have to work a lot harder. And right now he's got a good thing going with the Lions that can really set them up to dominate in that division or potentially the conference for the next couple of seasons at least. I don't think Dan Campbell's going to be in play here, Nick, and I don't even know if it would really work out like that. I think he'd certainly get these guys motivated, but again, the games are just so completely different, and I don't think we've ever really seen an NFL guy come down to the college ranks by choosing. You guys see guys like Lovie Smith, Greg Schiano make their way back down to the college ranks because it didn't exactly pan out in the NFL, but you don't see successful coaches at that level jump down to the college ranks. But again, maybe the paycheck will be something that they can attract here. Certainly, it's a very rare when that opportunity arises. But again, I don't think Dan Campbell's going to be a play here one bit.
Totally on board if you hear this doesn't make any sense for me. Has no experience coaching in college. If he had some small experience as an assistant, maybe you could throw it in there and consider it, but I think it just doesn't make any sense. And if I'm Dan Campbell, I want to stay in Detroit. I'm building a team that is competitive. Yes, he has a losing record currently, but they're getting closer and closer to be competitive. They can potentially take over that division considering the weakness of the Packers and the Vikings. I don't think this makes any sense for Campbell right now. I think he's going to be locked in there up top in Detroit.
And now looking at Urban Meyer, of course, this is going to be a name that's going to be brought up over plenty of jobs, even Michigan State jobs certainly is rumored for that. This is a guy that's been successful everywhere, from Bowling Green to Utah, Florida, Ohio State, had an 83-9 record with the Buckeyes, won a national championship, 187-32 record, went to the NFL with the Jaguars. That didn't really pan out. Wasn't all due to what was on the field, but off the field as well. They didn't trust him one bit, is what the final word was from Jags owner Shad Khan. And I think that's kind of the sentiment most people feel, Nick. This is a guy that recently just said he's not interested in returning to the sidelines. Well, his word's kind of worth nothing, especially if they're going to throw $20-30 million a year potentially at you, right? Probably not that high, but 10-15 million, somewhere in that range. This is a guy that's won everywhere. Everyone would want him to coach. Obviously, his last tenure didn't exactly end very well, and twice it seems like he's just kind of given up on programs in Ohio State and Florida. And I think he would do great at Texas A&M. He'd certainly bring in the talent. He'd put these guys to work, and I think they would certainly be heavily improved. And I think it'd be fun to watch in the new look SEC. But he seems kind of hesitant to return. And again, it seems there's always something with this guy that's controversial or just has you scratching your head that could certainly end up backstabbing them and resulting in another high-end buyout. So how do you feel about Urban Meyer potentially coming down the College Station of everything I just laid out?
This would be a certainly interesting move. Obviously, in college football, winning is all that matters, and especially at A&M, they just want to win. If you bring in Urban Meyer, I guarantee you will get results. But how pretty will it be off the field? How pretty will it be on the field? I can't confirm that for you. I think it would be a mess, a PR nightmare. Obviously, what happened in Jacksonville was a total disaster. That didn't make a whole lot of sense from day one, and that just fell apart very quickly. At the Buckeyes, he was a fantastic winner. At Florida, he was a fantastic winner. At Utah, a fantastic winner. At Bowling Green, a fantastic winner. But the off-the-field issue at Ohio State, we're not going to get into. What happened at Ohio State. What happened at Florida. Obviously, there were issues, but the resume speaks for itself. 3 national championships, 2 at Florida, 1 at Ohio State. Tons of great bowl wins, Fiesta, Sugar, Cotton, Rose, you name it. 2 conference titles in the Big Ten where they did not make the playoffs. Division titles in all of his years at Ohio State. Division titles at Florida where they didn't win the SEC. Winning the conference at Utah back-to-back years. His coaching resume is obviously one of the best in college football in this era, and he's a fantastic guy. At 59 years old, he's still pretty young by coaching standards and could still have another swing in him, but he looks to be pretty comfortable at the pundit chairs. He sits there, on an analyst on Big Noon Kickoff. He seems to be pretty comfortable. The record, though, speaks for itself, 187-32. If you want to get results and you hire Urban Meyer, I guarantee you with the money they have, the recruits they're going to bring in, Urban Meyer is going to win you a whole lot of ball games. It's just going to be a mess PR, and it has a very high risk for a very high buyout. Like you said, that could blow up within a year or two very quickly. It is a high risk, high reward sort of gamble down there in College Station.
Yeah, and then before we wrap this up, just throw in a couple other names. Guys like Glenn Schumann potentially could get the nod. Mike Norvell maybe will get a phone call. Nick, do you have any other names you want to add? And then what's your prediction? Who do you think is going to be the next head coach at Texas A&M?
Yeah, 2 names I'm going to add are guys that are on the staff currently. Bobby Petrino has a history of winning in college football. Won at Arkansas. That Arkansas team was not fantastic, but he got results with them in the past, which I think is another thing that's important to prove. An SEC guy who got results at Arkansas, 8-5, 10-3, 11-2. Obviously, that blew up due to off-the-field issues, and that's another guy with a whole history of head case issues. Was fantastic at his first stint at Louisville, 12-1, 11-1, 9-3. Great results there. Had a pretty decent tenure in his second return there as well. Coached Lamar Jackson, obviously, who was very fantastic for them, 9-4, 8-5, 9-4, 8-5. Pretty decent tenure for the Cardinal as well. Had a good year at Western Kentucky during his 1 year there. He's already on the staff. This offense has improved tenfold under him so far. So I think this could be an interesting in-house hire. I don't know if A&M fans would like that, but this guy's won at the SEC level, so you could certainly make the case. And then the final one is another guy who's in there. This one I don't think makes a lot of sense, but it's possible. DJ Durkin, previously a head coach at Maryland, currently a defensive coordinator, was Ole Miss defensive coordinator in the past. Michigan DC, Florida DC. He's coached some fantastic defenses. This defense has been really good so far at A&M. It's been a fantastic unit. Durkin obviously got fired due to off-the-field issues at Maryland and was really underperforming. So I don't think they want to see Durkin be hired, but I think you have to take a look considering he's already on your books and has a history as a head coach.
Yeah, so who do you think will be the next head coach here? Plenty of candidates. A lot of money's going to be thrown around. Fans are going to want a splashy name. Do you think it's going to be splashy, or is it going to be one that makes more sense?
I think it's going to be Mike Elko. That's the pick I'm going to go with right now. I think it's down to him or Kiffin for me. I'm going to take Mike Elko, the more more stable pick, the better pick in my opinion. Kiffin's the flashier pick and obviously excite the fans. But I think Elko's going to coach you a hard-hitting defense, and if you give Elko the tools to work with, I think he can certainly build you a winning resume very quickly. I think Elko makes a whole lot of sense here. The fans might not love it, but I think from a logistics standpoint, this makes way too much sense for me.
Great minds think alike. Mike Elko is the pick for me as well. He's still pretty close to a lot of those guys on staff. I think Kevin Johns, he's been a good coordinator for many years. I think bringing him on over as well would be the right approach to get things started in College Station. And this is a guy that only has like a $5 million buyout. You probably don't have to pay him all that much. So I think this will probably make more sense, like you said, from a logistical standpoint. I think you'll see plenty of success as well. It's going to be it for today's episode, Nick. The day finally came. Jimbo Fisher dismissed at Texas A&M. Didn't think it would happen in November of 2023, but here we are.
First high-profile firing. A couple of names are on the hot seat. A couple of names here and there should be fired through the next couple of weeks, and we'll certainly break down all the potential coaching vacancies at major schools in college football. The big one, though, the first one, absolutely massive, Texas A&M. This is going to be a very interesting college coaching search for this program.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.
Oh, that was so fun.